ABC Kinderteach presents Ruby the Copycat, written by Peggy Rathmann. Monday was Ruby's first day in Miss Hart's class. Class, this is Ruby, announced Miss Hart. Ruby, you may use the empty desk behind Angela. Angela is the girl with the pretty red bow in her hair. Angela smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at Angela's bow and tiptoed to her seat. So this must be Angela, because she has a red bow in her hair, and this must be where Ruby's supposed to sit, and this must be Ruby. I'm thinking that Ruby has moved to this school because the other kids seem to already know what's going on, and so she may have come a month or two after school started, maybe. She looks a little bit worried about starting in a new school. I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend. And pleasant just means happy, said Miss Hart. Does anyone have something to share? I was the flower girl at my sister's wedding, said Angela. That's exciting, said Miss Hart. Ruby raised her hand halfway. I was the flower girl at my sister's wedding, too. What a coincidence, or something that happens at the same time, said Miss Hart. Angela turned and smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at the top of Angela's head. Class, please take out your reading books, said Miss Hart. So I am not sure. I don't think that Ruby has a sister that got married the same weekend as Angela. That just is too much of a coincidence. I think she is just trying to imitate Angela. I don't know why, but maybe it has to do with being in a new place and trying to fit in, maybe. At lunchtime, Ruby hopped all the way home on one foot. She seems to like to hop. When Ruby came back to school, she was wearing a red bow in her hair. She slid into her seat behind Angela. I like your bow, whispered Angela. I like yours too, whispered Ruby. Class, please take out your math books, said Miss Hart. So Ruby is copying Angela. Angela came to school with a red bow. Ruby gets a red bow when she goes home for lunch. She must be trying to fit in. So she's trying to copy Angela. On Tuesday morning, Angela wore a sweater with daisies on it. At lunchtime, Ruby hopped home sideways. She likes to hop. When Ruby came back to school after lunch, she was wearing a sweater with daisies on it. I like your sweater, whispered Angela. I like yours too, whispered Ruby. And look at Angela has a sweater with flowers sewn in, and it looks like Ruby has a sweater where she just cut out pictures of flowers and put them on with safety pins. So she's trying to be just like Angela. And it looks like from the math they're doing, this might be first grade, maybe. On Wednesday, Angela wore a hand-painted t-shirt with matching sneakers, and those are just tennis shoes that look like her t-shirt. After lunch, Ruby hopped back to school, hopped again, wearing a hand-painted t-shirt with matching sneakers. Why are you sitting like that? Whispered Angela. Wet paint, said Ruby. So she must have went home at lunchtime and painted a shirt and maybe even her shoes to look like Angela's. On Thursday morning during sharing time, Angela modeled the flower girl dress she wore at her sister's wedding. Model just means wore it so others could look at it. Ruby modeled her flower girl dress too, right after lunch. Angela didn't whisper anything. So she is not really wearing a flower girl dress. It must be just a dress, maybe her mom's dress, I don't know. So I think Angela is getting tired of Ruby copying her, but I think Ruby just wants Angela to be her friend, maybe. By coincidence, on Friday morning, both girls wore red and lavender striped dresses, and lavender is like a light purple. At lunchtime, Angela raced home. When Angela came back to school, she was wearing black, so she did not want to look the same as Ruby. So she's getting mad about Ruby copying everything. I don't think Ruby's trying to be mean. I think she's trying to be liked, but Angela is getting tired of it. On Friday afternoon, Miss Hart asked everyone to write a short poem. "Who would like to read first?" asked Miss Hart. Angela raised her hand. She stood by her desk and read, "I had a cat I could not see because it stayed in back of me. It was a very loyal pet. It's sad we never really met." "That was very good," said Miss Hart. "Now, who's next?" Miss Hart looked around the room. "Ruby?" Ruby stood and recited slowly. "I had a nice pet who I never met because it always stayed behind me, and I'm sure it was a cat too." So it was pretty much the same poem that Angela wrote. Not quite, because I don't think she could remember what Angela wrote after she said it, but I think it was pretty close, don't you? Ruby smiled at the back of Angela's head. Someone whispered. Ruby sat down. "What a coincidence," murmured Miss Hart. Angela scribbled something on a piece of paper, and scribbled just means, in this case, wrote quickly. She passed it to Ruby. The note said, "You copied me. I'm telling Miss Hart. P.S. I hate your hair that way." Ruby buried her chin in the collar of her blouse, which means she hid her chin. A big tear rolled down her nose and plopped onto the note. When the bell rang, Miss Hart sent everyone home except Ruby. So what's she going to say to Ruby? Ruby's feeling sad. But I think Miss Hart also knows that Ruby is copying Angela, and Angela doesn't really like it. So I think she's going to talk to her about maybe not copying, maybe. Miss Hart closed the door of the schoolroom and sat on the edge of Ruby's desk. "Ruby, dear," she said gently, which means said in a soft voice, "you don't need to copy everything Angela does. You can be anything you want to be, but be Ruby first. I like Ruby." Miss Hart smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at Miss Hart's beautiful, polished fingernails. "Have a nice weekend," said Miss Hart. "Have a nice weekend," said Ruby. Uh-oh, she is staring at her fingernails. Oh, I wonder what that means. On Monday morning, Miss Hart said, "I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend." "I did. I went to the opera." And opera is a play that is performed mostly by singing, not just a lot of talking, but mostly singing. Miss Hart looked around the room. "Does anyone have something to share?" Ruby waved her hand. Glued to every finger was a pink plastic fingernail, just like Miss Hart. "I went to the opera too," said Ruby. "She did not," whispered Angela. Miss Hart folded her hands and looked very serious. "Ruby, dear," said Miss Hart gently, "did you do anything else this weekend?" What do you think Ruby's going to say? I don't think she really went to the opera. I think she was just copying Miss Hart because she likes Miss Hart. Ruby peeled off a fingernail. "I hopped," said Ruby. The class giggled. Ruby's ears turned red, which means she felt funny about people laughing at her. "But I did. I hopped around the picnic table 10 times. Ruby looked around the room. "Watch!" So all this time, Ruby's been hopping around, hopping here, hopping home. So maybe she can really hop. Ruby sprang from her desk. She hopped forward, she hopped backward, she hopped sideways with both eyes shut. Wow, she is quite the hopper. The class cheered and clapped their hands to the beat of Ruby's feet. Ruby was the best hopper they had ever seen. Miss Hart turned on the tape player and said, "Follow the leader, do the Ruby hop." So Ruby led the class around the room while everyone copied her. So they are copying her because she's doing something that is a lot of fun and she's good at. So she realizes maybe that she doesn't have to copy everybody else. She can just be herself because she does do things that are great. And at noon, Ruby and Angela hopped home for lunch. So when Ruby stopped trying so hard to be Angela's friend, maybe, that she actually found that she could be a good friend to Angela and they could have a good time together just being herself.